The front door slammed shut behind me, echoing louder than I expected in the quiet of our Christmas-decorated house. My heels clicked against the polished hardwood floor as I held the silver tray of hors d'oeuvres, pretending nothing had changed. I could feel the soft silk of my blouse under my fingers, the one I'd picked this morning, thinking, "Today, I'll be composed. Today, I'll be untouchable." Then it happened. The door to the dining room burst open. My husband, Greg, stood there, face red, chest heaving. "Leave. We don't want you here." His voice was louder than the holiday music playing softly in the background. The words hit me like snow-laden branches against the window, sharp and sudden. I froze, gripping the tray so tightly I feared it would shatter. And for a moment, the years collapsed. All the nights I had endured whispers, the silent judgments, the sting of being dismissed. My mind raced. Do I run? Do I cry? Or do I finally stand? I looked around. The twinkling lights on the Christmas tree, the warmth of the fireplace, the scent of cinnamon and pine, it all mocked the chaos Greg tried to impose. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from my mentor, Jane. "Remember who you are, Sam. This is just a curtain. Step through it." That message steadied me. I drew a slow, controlled breath, feeling the firmness in my chest where fear had once lived. Tonight, the door wasn't going to be my prison. Tonight, it was the stage. I remembered that winter like it was etched in frost on the windows. I was 24, fresh out of college, full of dreams but terrified of showing them. I had invited Greg and his family over for dinner once, trying to bridge the widening gap between us, to make peace, or at least be accepted. But instead, I was met with cold stares and a chorus of dismissive laughter. "Why are you even trying, Sam? You'll never be one of us," Greg's mother had said, her voice like ice over my heart. My hands had trembled as I carried the casserole to the table. Every fiber of my being screamed that I was worthy, that I belonged somewhere, anywhere, beyond this suffocating judgment. I remember the lump in my throat and the sharp sting of tears threatening to fall. My little brother, Matt, tried to speak up, but even his voice was small, swallowed by the weight of disapproval. I clutched a small, worn notebook in my bag, my grandmother's gift, given with a wink and a whisper. "Write your own story, Sam. Don't let anyone else hold the pen." That notebook had been my lifeline. Every word I wrote, every plan I sketched, was a rebellion against the world that tried to diminish me. I'd stay up late, penning ideas for businesses, reading endlessly, teaching myself to code, to negotiate, to be my own advocate. The fight wasn't just about that dinner. It was about years of subtle contempt, the cold silences, the way my dreams were dismissed as impractical. That night, as Greg's father muttered something about wasting potential, I felt a fire ignite within me. I left their house with my head high, my grandmother's words burning in my mind. I vowed then that I would not let their rejection define me. I would build something they couldn't ignore. I would prove, not to them, but to myself, that I could thrive on my own terms. That small, tattered notebook wasn't just paper and ink. It was the blueprint of the life I was determined to claim. After that night, I threw myself into building a life that was mine. The notebook my grandmother had given me became my constant companion. I filled it with business ideas, budgets, and daily goals. I took evening classes, learned skills I had been too timid to try before, and accepted freelance gigs that barely paid at first, but each one taught me something invaluable. It wasn't easy. There were nights when exhaustion pressed me into my apartment couch, and I questioned whether I had the strength to continue. Self-doubt whispered that maybe my family had been right, that perhaps I wasn't enough. But then I'd glance at the notebook, the words "write your own story" scrawled on its inside cover, and push myself forward. Jane, a seasoned marketing executive I met at a local seminar, became my mentor. She had a way of seeing potential that others overlooked and refused to let me settle for small victories. "Sam," she said once, tapping a graph I had drawn, "stop apologizing for your ambition. Build, expand, be seen, and do it without asking for permission." Her guidance was the nudge I needed to take real risks, launching my first official client campaign, negotiating contracts I hadn't dared touch before. Every milestone was hard-earned. I remember the first time a client paid me more than I'd ever earned in a month. I locked myself in my tiny apartment office and cried, not from sadness, but from relief and pride. I made my first profitable sale on an e-commerce project, learned to manage a team, and slowly transformed from a timid, overlooked woman into a capable, confident professional. Yet I kept most of it hidden. Greg and his family didn't need to know how well I was doing. I posted casual, modest updates on social media, keeping the facade of just getting by. It was my private triumph, a world they could never touch or diminish. I decorated my new apartment with little symbols of my journey, art I bought with my first paycheck, a small shelf lined with the notebooks I had filled over the years, and a framed note from my grandmother. "The pen is always yours, Sam. Write boldly." The distance between me and my past life grew with each passing year. I was building a version of myself that no rejection could shake. And yet, beneath the layers of success, I knew a confrontation was inevitable. The door they had slammed in my face years ago would one day swing open again, and this time, I would be ready. The doorbell rang, sharp against the quiet hum of the fire crackling in my living room. I took a steadying breath, smoothed my silk blouse, and let my heels click on the hardwood as I opened. There they were, Greg, his mother, and a few relatives I hadn't seen in years, expecting to find the timid, struggling woman they remembered. Instead, they were met with me. I had spent years building not just a career, but a life that reflected who I truly was. My apartment was a showcase of subtle elegance. Modern art hung on the walls, a polished oak desk in the corner stacked neatly with business folders, and the soft glow of designer lamps casting warmth over the room. The scent of fresh pine mingled with vanilla candles, welcoming yet commanding attention. I set the tray of Christmas treats on the table, meeting Greg's eyes directly. I let them take it all in before I spoke. The pause stretched long enough for them to notice the subtle authority in my posture, the quiet confidence that radiated from every detail of the space. "Surprised?" I asked, my voice calm, measured. "I thought you might want to see the woman you wrote off so many years ago." Greg opened his mouth, but no words came. His mother's face paled, and I could see the recognition, the dawning realization that this was no longer the Sam Hayes they remembered. I guided them into the living area, offering drinks, though I knew they wouldn't touch them. I run my own consulting firm now. We work with clients across the country. Last year, our revenue grew by nearly 70%. I'm also a partner in a startup that I co-founded from scratch. They blinked, processing. Greg's jaw tightened. His mother's hand clutched the back of a chair. I let the silence stretch just long enough to give them space to absorb it. "This," I continued, gesturing around, "isn't about the money, though I'm certainly financially independent. It's about standing on my own 2 feet, creating something that no one could take from me. That woman you tried to belittle, the one you told to leave, she's not here anymore. I am." Their reactions were priceless. Wide eyes, slackened jaws, a shifting of weight, as though the ground beneath them had subtly changed. I saw the guilt, the shame, even a hint of awe. I could almost hear their thoughts. How did I miss this? How did I underestimate her? I stepped closer, closing the distance, letting the authority in my presence speak louder than words. "I didn't just survive your rejection. I thrived. And now you get to witness it. But let me be clear, this doesn't mean everything is forgiven automatically. Respect is earned, and it starts by acknowledging the part you played in the years I had to fight to become me." Greg's hands trembled slightly as he opened his mouth again. I shook my head, smiling softly but firmly. "No words yet. Just watch. Understand. Reflect." For the first time in years, the balance had shifted. The timid, overlooked Sam Hayes was gone. In her place stood a woman unafraid to command the room, unafraid to confront the past, and ready to define her own future. I let the room breathe for a moment, giving them space to process, then took my stance. The soft hum of the fireplace underscored the weight of the moment. This was no longer about proving myself. It was about setting the rules of engagement. I've spent years building a life that is mine, I said, my voice calm but firm. And if you want to be part of it, there are conditions. Not as punishment, but as a foundation for respect, understanding, and growth. Greg swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. I continued. First, honesty. No more lies, no more hiding feelings, no more pretending that rejection is acceptable. I won't accept toxic behavior or passive-aggressive manipulation. If you're here, it's with sincerity. His mother's lips pressed together, a mix of surprise and guilt in her eyes. I softened slightly, knowing change would be hard. Second, acknowledge the past without excuses. You can't undo the years of dismissal and hurt, but you can recognize them. Understanding what you caused helps you, and helps me decide if our connection is worth preserving. I looked at Greg directly. Third, you must pursue your own growth. I've built my independence not by tearing others down, but by standing on my own. I will not carry the weight of anyone else's stagnation. If you're stagnant, unwilling to reflect, unwilling to change, you will not have access to me emotionally, financially, or otherwise. There was a pause. Matt, my younger brother, nodded slowly. He had always been quietly supportive, but even he seemed taken aback by the firmness in my tone. I allowed a faint smile. This isn't about revenge. It's about alignment. If we are to have a relationship, it has to be real, grounded, and healthy. If you cannot commit to that, then step back and respect my space. Greg's shoulders slumped slightly. His mother's hands wrung nervously. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. The years of me bending and shrinking for their comfort had ended. I felt the strength coursing through me, a mix of triumph and compassion. Lastly, I said, softening my tone just enough to offer hope, we start small. Actions, not words. Demonstrate change through behavior, not apologies. Show respect for the person I've become, and we can build a new kind of relationship, one that isn't trapped in past mistakes. I stepped back, letting the silence settle. Their faces revealed what words could not, a mix of awe, humility, and recognition. The woman who had once been dismissed, mocked, and told to leave was now a force they couldn't ignore, a presence demanding acknowledgement and change. Tonight, I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't begging for acceptance. I was simply stating the terms, the rules of engagement for any future interaction. Compassion without compromise, love with boundaries, respect earned, not assumed. And in that room, as I watched them process the conditions, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. The power was mine. I had finally stepped fully into it. The following weeks were quiet but transformative. Greg began showing up, not with anger or entitlement, but with small acts of consideration, asking about my schedule before making plans, listening without interrupting, even volunteering to help with a community project I had started. His mother, too, softened, asking questions about my work, seeking advice, and genuinely acknowledging the years she had underestimated me. I watched these changes with a mixture of cautious optimism and satisfaction. They weren't perfect. Change never is, but the willingness to adjust, to step out of old patterns, was enough. Matt continued to be a steady presence, quietly supportive, reminding me of the little gestures that mattered. A coffee dropped off at my office, a text checking on a big meeting, a laugh shared over a memory that once hurt. One evening, as I sat by the fire, my grandmother's worn notebook resting on my lap, I reflected on the journey. I thought about the fear that had once pinned me to the floor of a crowded dinner, the sting of rejection, the nights I had cried myself to sleep. I thought about the countless hours of work, the risks taken, the growth earned. And I realized that the woman who stood in that living room on Christmas, firm, composed, and unapologetically herself, was the same woman who had dared to dream despite every obstacle. I traced the words in the notebook. Write your own story, Sam. Don't let anyone else hold the pen. That advice had carried me from trembling uncertainty to self-assured power. It had reminded me over and over that independence isn't just about financial success, It's about emotional ownership, about writing a life on your own terms. And now, watching the tentative but real changes in those who had once doubted me, I felt a deep, quiet joy. The past was no longer a chain, it was a catalyst. The door that had once been slammed in my face had opened, yes, but this time, it opened to my terms. I smiled, a soft, confident curve of lips, and whispered to myself, I am not defined by their rejection. I am defined by my courage, my choices, and the life I've created. For the first time in years, I felt fully, completely at peace, strong, independent, and unshakable. And for the record, the door? It was never theirs to close again.